Have you ever wondered what really happens in the places we visit every day when the lights go out and everyone leaves? It was exactly 3:47 a.m. when Derek Thompson froze in front of the security monitor. His eyes scanned the bluish screen once more, as if trying to convince his own brain that this wasn't real. But there it was, flashing insistently, a notification that shouldn't exist in any system. Access granted, Sarah Mitchell, employee ID active. Derek's heart raced. His hands began to sweat, because Derek knew exactly who Sarah Mitchell was, and he knew with absolute certainty that she had been dead for 3 years. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover goes far beyond a simple corporate horror story. This really happened in Seattle, USA, in a building awaiting demolition, where secrets that should have been buried forever began to surface in the most disturbing way possible. Derek was a Navy veteran, a man trained to remain calm under pressure, but nothing he had experienced in the war could have prepared him for that night. Have you ever felt that shiver down your spine when you realize something is profoundly wrong? That visceral feeling that you should run away, but your feet simply won't obey. That was exactly what Derek felt when the access system registered the entry of a dead woman on the 7th floor of the abandoned Technova Industries building. What would you do in that situation? Would you ignore it and pretend you didn't? Say anything? Would you call the police? Or would you do what Derek was about to do, go up to that forbidden floor, the only place in the building where he had express orders never, ever to set foot? What Derek didn't realize was that by deciding to investigate that impossible notification, he was opening the door to a conspiracy involving erased lives, stolen identities, and prisoners held in broad daylight without anyone knowing. Some corporate secrets are buried for a reason, but that night, Derek would discover that they don't always stay buried forever, and what he found on the 7th floor would change everything. And before I tell you what Derek found on that 7th floor, I need to pause for a second and tell you something important. Look, I know this kind of story affects us in a different way. It's not just entertainment, it's about real people, real lives, secrets someone tried to hide. And if you're here with me now, feeling that chill down your spine, that curiosity, mixed with tension, it's because it touches something inside you too. So I want to ask you something. Leave a comment below about what you're feeling right now. Have you ever been in a situation at work where you felt something was wrong, but everyone pretended everything was fine? Have you ever had that feeling that there was more to the story than meets the eye? Tell us about it, because your experience matters. This community we're building here is made up of people like you who aren't afraid to question, to seek the truth, to listen to stories that need to be told. If this story is impacting you, if you want to continue discovering real cases like this, click like now. This helps more people find this content. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and activate the bell, because every week I bring stories that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the world around us. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content that really matters. Thank you so much for being here with me. Now take a deep breath, because what Derek was about to discover in that abandoned building went beyond anything he or you could have imagined. Derek Thompson never imagined his life would reach this point. At 34, a decorated Navy veteran, a man who had served his country honorably, he now found himself accepting a job as a night watchman in an abandoned building in Seattle. 3 months, unemployed. Bills piling up on the kitchen table as cruel reminders of a reality he tried to ignore. His pride wounded with each unanswered resume, each interview that ended with a "we'll be in touch" that never materialized. The transformation from war hero to just another number in the unemployment statistics had been brutal and silent. When the offer from Technova Industries arrived, Derek could hardly believe it. The pay was too good for such a simple job. Walking through the empty floors of an abandoned corporate building, checking the security cameras, ensuring no one broke into the property awaiting demolition. 8 hours a night, 5 nights a week, alone with his thoughts and the distant hum of the old equipment. Too easy, he thought on the first day, as his supervisor handed him the keys and a basic list of instructions. No complex training, no endless bureaucracy. Just him, the silence, and a 12-story building that had seen better days. But there's something about decisions made in desperation that you only understand later. Derek accepted that job because he needed to pay the bills, because he needed to feel useful again, because he needed something, anything, that would bring back a minimum of structure to his crumbling life. What he didn't know was that he was about to witness something much bigger than himself, much more dangerous than any mission he had faced in combat. The truth hidden behind the scenes of that abandoned building was waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the surface. In the first few weeks, the routine was exactly what they promised. Derek would arrive at 11 at night, patrol the floors, check the cameras, and note any irregularities in the digital report he sent to his supervisor. The building was a skeleton of what had once been the headquarters of a promising technology company. Tables covered with dusty tarps, computers turned off for years, meeting rooms with chairs still positioned as if everyone had simply gotten up and left in the middle of a presentation. There was something profoundly melancholic about it all, the visual impact of abandoned corporate dreams, interrupted careers, a business journey that ended abruptly without clear explanations. Derek started noticing the small anomalies first. A chair he was sure was in a certain position appeared to be facing another direction. A computer that should have been completely switched off blinked a faint LED light as he walked down the 5th-floor hallway at 2 in the morning. Doors he swore he'd locked on his previous round were open when he returned. He meticulously noted everything down. His military mindset wouldn't allow him to ignore details. But every time he sent the report, the supervisor's response was always the same short, dismissive message. "Old building, Derek. The structure moves. Relax." But Derek couldn't relax. His intuition, that inner voice that had kept him alive in war zones, whispered that something was wrong. Revelations rarely come all at once. They come in layers, in small clues that accumulate until you can no longer ignore the pattern, and the pattern was starting to become too clear to be a coincidence. Then came that Tuesday, the night that would change everything, the night the access system revealed the impossible. And Derek realized with icy, absolute clarity that he wasn't alone in that building. He never had been. The human mind has a curious way of dealing with the inexplicable. At first, we rationalize, we find logical explanations, we convince ourselves that we're imagining things. Derek did exactly that in the first few weeks. Every little anomaly he noticed gained a reasonable justification in his head. That chair on the 3rd floor that was facing the window when he was absolutely sure he'd left it leaning against the desk. He was probably tired and confused. The computer on the 5th floor that blinked a bluish LED light, even though it had supposedly been turned off for 3 years. Maybe some residual energy on the motherboard, old electronic stuff. The doors he religiously locked and found open hours later. Well, old building, the structure moves, as the supervisor always said. But there's a limit to how much we can rationalize before the hidden truth starts screaming louder than our excuses. And for Derek, that limit was dangerously approaching. He began to write everything down, with almost obsessive precision. Exact times. Specific. Locations. Photos taken with his cell phone showing objects before and after. His military mindset resurfaced. In combat, ignoring patterns can cost lives. And there was a pattern there, even if he couldn't yet see the whole picture. The anomalies always happened between 2 and 4 in the morning, always on the upper floors, always involving technology that shouldn't be working. The psychological impact of working alone in such an environment is something few people truly understand. It's not fear of the dark or of ghosts. It's something deeper. It's the constant feeling of being watched. It's that shiver down your spine when you turn an empty hallway. It's the sound of your own footsteps echoing back to you in a way that feels almost answered. Derek tried to maintain his composure, but the solitary journey night after night was beginning to take its toll. He found himself talking to himself just to break the oppressive silence. He would call his wife at 3 in the morning just to hear a real human voice. And then came that Tuesday. Derek arrived for his shift as usual, at 11 o'clock at night. He made his first rounds through the floors as usual. Everything seemed normal, or at least as normal as an abandoned building can seem. He returned to the security room on the ground floor, made his coffee in the old machine he had brought from home, and sat down in front of the monitors. 12 screens showing different angles of different floors, empty corridors, dark rooms. Nothing but silence and shadows. It was exactly 3:47 a.m. when it happened. Derek was checking emails on his phone, barely paying attention to the screens, when a sharp sound made him look up. An electronic beep. The access control system. That specific sound that indicates when someone swipes a valid badge on the security door readers. Derek's heart raced instantly. There shouldn't be anyone in the building besides him. There never was anyone besides him. He glanced at the main monitor where the system notifications appeared, and there it was, flashing in green letters against the black background. Access granted. Sarah Mitchell, employee ID SM2847, floor 7, server room 034723. Derek blinked, read it again and again. His military training taught him that in times of crisis you breathe, you process, you act, but nothing had prepared him for this. He knew that name, not personally, but he knew it, because on his first nights on the job, curious about the building's history, Derek had researched Technova Industries. He had read the old articles. He had seen the news. Sarah Mitchell, 29 years old, a brilliant software engineer, killed in a car accident in October 2021, 3 years ago. The obituary was still online. The family's condolences were still archived on the local newspaper's website. And now, at 3:47 a.m. on an ordinary Tuesday, her badge had just been used to access the 7th floor, the server floor, the only floor in the entire building where Derek had a specific non-negotiable instruction from his supervisor: never go up there, just monitor the cameras, never go upstairs. Derek felt cold sweat trickle down his back. His hands trembled slightly as he zoomed in on the 7th floor camera image. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the red emergency light. But something was different. A bluish light pulsed at the end of the hallway, coming from the server room. Derek stood up from his chair. Every instinct he had screamed that something was profoundly, terribly wrong, and in that moment, a decision formed in his mind, a decision that would change everything. If you've ever had to make a decision knowing there's no going back, that once you cross that line, everything changes forever, write in the comments, no turning back. Because Derek was about to do exactly that. Derek didn't move immediately. He stood there, staring at the flashing green notification on the screen, as if waiting long enough would make it disappear or reveal itself to be a system error. But it was still there. Sarah Mitchell, access granted. 7th floor, 3:47 a.m. He picked up his phone with trembling hands and typed her name into Google. The transformation from casual curiosity to desperate investigation took only seconds. The results appeared instantly. Obituary from the Seattle Times, October 2021. Sarah Mitchell, 29, software engineer at Technova Industries, tragically died in a car accident on Highway 5. Leaves behind parents, a younger brother, and a devastated community of colleagues. Instead of flowers, the family requested donations to a charity in her name. Derek continued scrolling down the page. More articles, more details. The accident had happened on a rainy night, 3 months before Technova abruptly closed its doors. Her car veered off the road, hit a guardrail, and rolled over. Instant death, according to reports. No suspicion of foul play. Just another tragedy in Seattle's traffic. Statistics. But there was something in the subtext that bothered Derek. The company closed so quickly after her death, without warning. No official announcements beyond a generic corporate statement about strategic restructuring. Employees arrived for work on a Monday and found the doors locked, just like that, as if someone had flipped a switch and turned everything off. And now, 3 years later, Sarah Mitchell's badge was active, not just active, being used. That very night. At that very moment, Derek's rational mind battled the impossible. Corporate badges are deactivated when someone is fired, or in her case, when she dies. It's standard procedure, basic security protocol. So why was hers still working, and who the hell was using it? The questions multiplied faster than the answers, creating a labyrinth of possibilities in his mind, each more disturbing than the last. Derek turned his gaze to the monitors. The seventh-floor camera showed that dark corridor with the bluish light pulsing in the background. He zoomed in as much as the system allowed. The light was definitely coming from the server room, those servers that should have been turned off 3 years ago, those servers that no one should be accessing. That floor he had express orders never, under any circumstances, to physically enter. The supervisor's instructions on his first day of work had been crystal clear. You monitor the 7th floor through the cameras, Derek. Only through the cameras. Never go up there. Never enter that room. It's none of your business what's in there. Your job is just to ensure that no one from outside invades the building. At that moment, those instructions seemed reasonable. Perhaps there was still expensive equipment being catalogued. Perhaps there were pending legal issues. Companies have their reasons, and Derek wasn't paid to question them. But now, with his heart pounding against his ribs, that impossible notification on the screen, 3 years of obituaries, and suspicious accidents and abrupt closures weighing on his conscience, those instructions took on a completely different tone. They weren't safety guidelines, they were cover-up orders. And Derek knew, with a certainty that came from deep within him, that he needed to break that rule. His journey in that building was about to take a turn he never imagined when he accepted that job. He stood up from his chair. He took the large flashlight from the drawer. He checked his cell phone battery. 83%. Enough. He glanced at the monitors one last time, as if bidding farewell to the version of himself that could still simply ignore it all, finish his shift, go home, and pretend nothing had happened. But that version was already dead. Decisions have a specific weight, and Derek felt that weight on his shoulders as he walked toward the elevator. Each step echoed in the empty lobby. The silence of the building seemed denser now, more heavy, as if the building itself were holding its breath. He pressed the elevator button. The light came on. He heard the mechanical sound of the cabin descending from the upper floors. The impact of that simple moment was immense. Once those doors opened, once he stepped inside and pressed the button for the 7th floor, there would be no turning back. Some revelations don't allow for return. Some truths, once seen, cannot be unlearned. Derek took a deep breath. The elevator doors opened with a metallic creak that seemed to scream. In the stillness of the night, Derek stepped into the elevator, and the door slammed shut behind him with a metallic sound that seemed to seal his fate. He pressed the button for the 7th floor and felt the cabin begin to ascend. The creaking was worse than he remembered. A high-pitched, metallic, almost organic sound, as if the elevator were complaining about finally having to function after being ignored for so long. Derek gripped the flashlight so tightly that his fingers ached. His hand was sweating. His heart pounded. A race he tried to control with deep breaths. Techniques he'd learned in combat. Techniques that now seemed insufficient in the face of the unknown that awaited him upstairs. The journey to the 7th floor took less than a minute, but to Derek it felt like an eternity. Every second was filled with intrusive thoughts. What if it was a trap? What if someone was waiting for him? What if this was all an elaborate test, and he was about to lose his job for disobeying? Direct orders. But then he remembered the notification. Sarah Mitchell, dead 3 years ago, and the rationalization crumbled. This wasn't a test. It was something much bigger. The elevator stopped. The number 7 lit up on the digital panel. Derek took a deep breath. The doors began to open, slowly, dramatically, revealing the 7th floor inch by inch. And that's when he saw it, the bluish light, pulsating at the end of the corridor like an electronic heart, rhythmic, hypnotic. A light. That shouldn't exist in a building abandoned for 3 years. Derek took his first step out of the elevator and immediately felt the difference. The air was different here, colder, denser, as if there were a distinct atmospheric pressure on that specific floor. He turned on the flashlight and began to walk. Each step echoed in the void in a disturbing way, as if something in the sound itself reverberated wrong. The hallway was the same as the other floors in structure. White walls, frosted glass. Doors to office rooms, grey commercial carpet, but there was a completely different energy here. The servers. Derek could hear the hum now, that characteristic sound of machines processing data, fans spinning, hard drives working. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Equipment like that doesn't stay on by itself for 3 years. Someone was keeping it running. Someone was here. The bluish light emanated from the room at the end of the corridor. The door was ajar, its ghostly glow leaking into the dark space. Derek approached slowly, all his senses on high alert. The visual impact of the scene, the pulsing light, the empty corridor, the silence broken only by the electronic hum, was almost cinematic in its strangeness. He was 3 meters from the door when he heard it. The sound that chilled his blood. Fingers typing on a keyboard. Fast, frantic, desperate. The kind of typing someone racing against time. Someone trying to finish something before it's too late. Derek stopped. His mind automatically switched to tactical mode. Assess the threat. Plan the approach. Secure an escape route. But then curiosity overcame his training. He needed to see. He needed to know. He took 2 more steps and reached the door. He pushed it lightly with his free hand. It opened without resistance, revealing a room full of servers with flashing lights, cables organized with military precision, and there, in the center of it all, a figure, a woman, her back to him, sitting in front of a computer. Dark hair falling over her shoulders, hands flying across the keyboard with impressive speed. She was so focused that she didn't even notice him entering. Derek swallowed hard. His voice came out weaker than he intended. "Excuse me?" The typing stopped instantly. The room fell into absolute silence except for the continuous hum of the servers. The woman stood completely still for a second that seemed to stretch on forever. Then, slowly, with an almost mechanical deliberation, she began to turn. Her head. Derek felt every muscle in his body tense. The transformation from that moment of investigation to direct confrontation happened in the blink of an eye. The bluish light of the monitors illuminated her profile as she turned, and when her face finally became visible, when Derek saw her eyes meeting his, filled with absolute terror and something else, recognition perhaps, relief, he realized that everything he thought he knew about that night, about that building, about the hidden truth, behind the scenes at Technova, was about to be shattered. If you've ever looked into someone's eyes and instantly known that their life was in your hands, write in the comments, "I saw it." Because what Derek was about to discover would change not only his life but the lives of many others. The woman who turned to face him wasn't Sarah Mitchell. Derek recognized the face immediately because he'd seen her picture in his obsessive research on Technova. Emma Chen, 31 years old, data, engineer. Killed in an apparent accidental drowning in Lake Washington in August 2021. Her body was found 3 days later. Closed funeral, devastated family. Another tragedy in the strange series of events that preceded the company's closure. But there she was, alive, breathing, terrified, looking at Derek as if he were a ghost who had just walked through the wall. Her eyes were wide, sunken, with deep dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights and chronic stress. Her face was thinner than in the obituary photos, her cheeks hollow, her skin too pale. She stood up from the chair so quickly she knocked it over. "You shouldn't be here," Emma whispered, and there was genuine panic in her voice. It wasn't anger, it was pure fear. "They'll know. They always know. How did you get in? How did you get past security?" Derek stood there, flashlight still in hand, trying to process the impossible. His rational mind was at war with the reality he saw before his eyes. "Emma Chen," he said, his voice hoarse. You're dead. I read your obituary. Your body was found in the lake. There was a funeral. How are you here?" The question sounded absurd even to himself, but what other reaction could he have? Emma looked at the door behind Derek as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. Then she laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound, completely devoid of humor, the kind of laugh that comes when you've cried so much that there are no tears left. "Dead on paper, Derek," she replied. And there was a deep resignation in those words. "Just like Sarah, just like 17 of us. We discovered something. And when you discover what Technova really did, what was really going on behind the scenes of this company, she paused, her eyes welling up. You don't die. You disappear. Derek's expression changed instantly, from confusion to understanding, from shock to horror. 17 people, 17 lives extinguished. Wait, are you telling me that... He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma nodded slowly. All the accidents, all the suicides, all the disappearances in the 6 months before Technova closed, they weren't accidental. They were neutralizations. That's what they call them. Risk neutralization. And we, the ones who died, we're stuck here. She lifted her trouser leg and Derek saw an electronic ankle monitor. Small, discreet, but definitely real. The impact of that revelation hit Derek like a punch to the gut. Prisoners, he repeated, still trying to process it. You're being held here, in this building, for 3 years. Emma returned to the computer but didn't sit down. She just stood there, staring at the screens filled with code that Derek couldn't understand. We're forced to work, to erase evidence, to modify records, to ensure that no one discovers what Technova was really doing. Illegal mass surveillance, selling the private data of millions of Americans, foreign governments, unscrupulous corporations, even criminal organizations, whoever paid the most. Her voice was growing louder now, fueled by years of pent-up anger. Sarah found out first. She was the brightest of us all. She found the hidden servers, the concealed financial records, the suspicious international transfers. Derek approached slowly, as if handling a frightened animal. And when she found out, Emma interrupted him. They didn't kill her, not literally. They staged the car accident. They placed an unidentified body of similar size. The police never did a DNA test because there was no reason to suspect. It was just another tragic accident on a rainy night. And Sarah was brought here, just like me, just like 17 others. In the first few months, there were a dozen of us trying to find a way out, but some couldn't take it. Real suicides this time. 3 jumped from upper floors. 2 somehow managed to, and we, the ones who remained, are still here. Working, surviving, waiting. Derek felt anger rise in his chest. This couldn't be happening. Not in the United States, not in the 21st century. How many of you are still alive? Emma looked at him, and for the first time, there was something resembling hope in her eyes. Fragile hope, almost extinguished, but still there. 6, including Sarah and me, scattered across the floors, working in shifts. If we try to leave the building, the ankle monitors send a signal. Private security arrives in 3 minutes. They drag us back. And the consequences? She trembled visibly. You don't want to know the consequences. Derek pulled up a chair and sat down, not because he was tired, but because his legs simply couldn't support him any longer. Emma continued talking, and each word that came out of her mouth painted an increasingly grim picture of the hidden truth behind that company that once seemed to be just another promising Seattle startup. Technova Industries, that shiny corporate facade with its modern offices and its stated mission of connecting people through technology, was actually something completely different. It was an illegal mass surveillance operation of terrifying proportions. They had access to everything, Emma explained, pacing nervously around the room as she spoke. Emails, text messages, browsing histories, location data, banking information, medical records, millions of Americans, tens of millions. They collected it through seemingly legitimate apps, through partnerships with other companies. Through loopholes in security systems they created themselves. And then they sold that information to whoever paid the most. Foreign governments interested in espionage, corporations wanting illegal market data, even drug cartels looking for information on specific targets or law enforcement routes. The impact of that revelation was difficult to process. Derek had served his country. He had risked his life defending American values of freedom and privacy. And now he was discovering that here, on American soil in a thriving city like Seattle, there was an operation violating all of that on an industrial scale. How did you find out? He asked, his voice more controlled than he had expected. Emma stopped walking and looked at him. Sarah was a systems security engineer. Part of her job was to ensure the servers were protected, but she started noticing strange patterns, massive data transfers happening at specific times, hidden servers not included in the company's official architecture, layered encryption that went far beyond what was necessary for a normal technology company. The journey of discovery had taken months. Sarah shared her suspicions with Emma, who was a data analytics specialist. Together, they began to dig deeper. They gathered other colleagues they trusted, people with a conscience, people who believed there were lines that shouldn't be crossed, regardless of the profit involved. There were 17 of us in total, Emma continued, her voice trembling, working in secret, copying files, documenting financial transfers, tracking data sales through offshore accounts. We had proof, irrefutable proof. We planned to take everything to the FBI. We had even contacted an investigative journalist from the New York Times, but the revelations never reached the public. Teknova had its own internal surveillance systems, its own ways of monitoring communications. They discovered what the group was doing a week before the planned disclosure. And then the neutralization began. It was systematic, Emma said, and tears began to stream down her face. James was the first. Car accident. Then Sarah. Then me. Then others. Each death or disappearance spaced days or weeks apart. Varying methods. Car accidents, drownings, falls, apparent suicides, unexplained disappearances. Nothing that raised red flags for the authorities. False obituaries were published. Funerals were held with empty coffins or unidentified bodies. Families mourned there. Losses without knowing their loved ones were still alive, trapped just a few miles away. Identities were erased, bank accounts closed, social media profiles deleted, as if they had never existed beyond the memories of the people who loved them. And they brought us here, Emma whispered, to this building. They keep us working, erasing evidence, altering records, ensuring no one ever finds out the truth. If we try to leave, the ankle monitors send a signal. Private security arrives in less than 3 minutes. They drag us back. And the consequences, she swallowed hard, make it very clear that death would be a mercy. Derek felt the transformation happening within him, from shocked observer to active participant. This was no longer just a disturbing discovery. It was a call to action. It was the moment that would define who he truly was. He looked at Emma, at that broken but still fighting woman, and made a decision. How many guards? Emma blinked, confused. What? Derek repeated, now with a firm voice, with that commanding tone he used when leading his unit on the battlefield. How many private security guards do they have? What's their protocol? Where are they based? Emma looked at him with a mixture of hope and terror. Derek, you don't understand. They're professionals, ex-military, armed, and even if you could get us out of here, where would we go? We're officially dead. We don't have identities. We don't have resources. We don't have... Derek interrupted. Her. Do you still have the evidence? The files you gathered? Emma nodded slowly. Backups on hidden flash drives. Sarah has most of them. We never completely gave up hope that one day... If you believe there is hope even in the most impossible situations, write in the comments, there is always a way out. Because Derek was about to prove exactly that. The anger Derek felt at that moment wasn't the explosive, uncontrolled rage of someone acting on impulse. It was something different. It was the cold, calculated anger of someone who had seen too much injustice in life and had finally found one where he could make a difference. It was the anger that transforms ordinary men into unlikely heroes. He looked at Emma, saw the despair mixed with hope in her eyes, and then heard soft footsteps coming from the hallway. Instinctively, his hand went to his waist, where he usually carried a weapon on duty, but found only emptiness. He was no longer in combat, or at least, he shouldn't be. A figure emerged from the shadows of the hallway. Another woman, too thin, dangerously thin, with sunken eyes that seemed to have witnessed horrors no human being should ever have to endure. Dark, disheveled hair fell over bony shoulders. She wore clothes that had once been professional, but were now worn and stained. Derek recognized the face immediately from the photos he had seen online. Sarah Mitchell, the first victim, the brilliant engineer who discovered the truth and paid the highest possible price without actually dying. She looked at Derek with an expression that mixed distrust and curiosity. "Who is he?" she asked Emma, her voice hoarse, as if it hadn't been used often. "The new night watchman," Emma replied. "Derek Thompson. He saw my access to the system and came to investigate." Sarah studied Derek for a long moment. That kind of assessment veterans make of each other, recognizing something in their posture, their gaze, the way someone carries themselves. "Military?" she asked. Derek nodded. "Navy. 3 tours in the Middle East." Sarah didn't answer, but something in her expression softened slightly. Respect, perhaps, or at least an understanding that he knew what it meant to be in impossible situations. Derek went straight to the point. "How many of you are still alive here?" The question came out harsher than he intended, but there was no time for niceties. Sarah exchanged a look with Emma before answering. 6, including the 2 of us. Michael is on the 5th floor, Lisa and Robert on the 9th, James on the 10th, the other... She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Derek understood. The 3-year journey trapped in that hell had taken its toll. Some had given up. Some had chosen the only escape that seemed possible. "They gave up trying," Sarah finally said, and there was a deep guilt in those words. Survivor's guilt, the guilt of those who continue fighting when others couldn't. Derek felt something shift inside him, an absolute clarity about what needed to happen. He looked at Sarah, then at Emma, and said the words that would change everything. "Let's get out of here, all of you, today, now." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah shook her head slowly, and Derek saw years of shattered hope in that simple gesture. "Impossible," she said, and the word carried the weight of countless failed attempts. "The security system is impenetrable. The ankle bracelets send a signal the moment we leave the permitted area, cameras at every exit point, armed guards with a response time of less than 3 minutes. They have eyes everywhere." Emma added, "We've already tried. In the first year we tried constantly. Michael almost lost his hand in one of the attempts. Lisa spent 2 weeks in a dark room as punishment. With each failure, the consequences got worse. Eventually, we stopped trying. We just survived. We covered our tracks as they told us to. We waited. For what, we don't know anymore. But we waited." Derek listened to all of this, and for the first time that entire night he smiled. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of someone about to do something insane, but necessary. The kind of smile soldiers give each other before a suicide mission that somehow needs to happen. "Sarah," he said, and there was a confidence in his voice she hadn't heard in years. "I'm a veteran. I served in combat zones where the impossible was our breakfast. And veterans know one fundamental thing that keeps you alive when all seems lost. There's always a way, always. It may not be obvious, it may not be safe, but there always is." He stood up from his chair and began pacing the room, his mind already processing possibilities, calculating variables, formulating a plan. "You have advantages you're not seeing. You know every inch of this building. You know the security protocols. You know the schedules. And now you have something you didn't have before." Sarah and Emma looked at him, waiting. "You have someone outside," Derek continued. "Someone who isn't on their records as a threat. Someone who has legitimate access to the building. Someone who can shut down systems, create distractions, open doors." The transformation in Sarah's expression was gradual but unmistakable. From despair to consideration. From consideration to possibility. From possibility to something she hadn't felt in a long time. Real hope. "Would you do it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "For people you don't even know. Would you risk your life, your job, your freedom?" Derek thought about his wife at home. He thought about the bills he needed to pay. He thought about the normal, safe life he could have if he simply ignored all of this. And then he thought about 6 people being held prisoner, 17 lives extinguished, millions of Americans having their privacy violated. The decision wasn't difficult. The plan took shape over the next 20 minutes. Derek Sarah, and Emma gathered in that server room, speaking in urgent whispers, sketching routes on scraps of paper, timing every second as if their lives depended on it, because they did. The strategy was risky, bordering on suicidal, but it was the only real chance they had. Derek would locate the main power system underground. At 4:32 a.m., the time when external surveillance was at its weakest point, according to the standards Sarah had memorized, he would pull the master lever. Total blackout. 90 seconds of absolute darkness. Before the emergency generators kicked in, 90 seconds. That was all they had. In that time, the electronic ankle bracelets would lose signal with the central system. The cameras would go blank. The magnetic doors would lock in the open position due to fire safety protocols. And in those precious 90 seconds, 6 people would need to descend from different floors, meet in the underground parking lot, and get into Derek's van, which was parked in space B7. The transformation of broken prisoners into desperate fugitives would happen in the blink of an eye. There was no margin for error, none. While Derek went underground, Emma had an equally crucial mission. She needed to hack the system one last time and download the most incriminating files. The final evidence still remaining on the servers, evidence that Technova hadn't been able to completely erase because they needed their prisoners to do it gradually so as not to raise suspicions in external audits. Emma would work quickly, her fingers flying across the keyboard as Derek had seen when he first entered. 2 flash drives, redundant copies, everything they needed to destroy the company and expose the entire conspiracy. Sarah had the most difficult task. She would need to gather the other 4 within 90 seconds of darkness. Michael on the 5th floor, Lisa and Robert on the 9th, James on the 10th. All weakened by years of captivity, all terrified by the consequences of previous attempts. She would need to convince them in seconds that this time was different, that this time they had a real chance. The mindset required for this was something only someone like Sarah, who had kept the flame of hope alive for 3 endless years, could possess. Derek glanced at his watch. 4:15 in the morning, 17 minutes. He took a deep breath and looked at the 2 women. "See you in the parking lot," he said. And there was a promise in those words. A promise that he wouldn't abandon them. A promise that this time the journey would end in freedom and not punishment. Sarah held his arm for a second. "Thank you," she whispered. "No matter what happens, thank you for trying." Derek simply nodded. Words were unnecessary now. Only actions mattered. He descended to the basement via the service stairs, each step measured, each breath controlled. The military training returned as if it had never left. The power room was exactly where Sarah had said it would be. A large room filled with electrical panels, transformers humming softly, thick cables running across the ceiling. And there in the center the master lever, large, red, with a warning in yellow letters. Emergency. Total system shutdown. Derek positioned himself beside it. 4:28, 4:29, 4:30, 4:31, 4:32. Derek pulled the lever forcefully. The impact was immediate and absolute. All the lights went out at once. The constant hum of the electrical systems died instantly. Total darkness enveloped the building like a suffocating blanket. He heard the alarms trying to sound but failing. The backup system hadn't yet kicked in. 90 seconds. Derek's mental stopwatch started ticking. He ran to the stairs, climbing 2 steps at a time, flashlight in hand illuminating the path. He needed to reach the underground parking garage. 65 seconds. He heard screams echoing through the floors, running footsteps, Sarah shouting names. "Michael, Lisa, Robert, James, now!" The urgency in her voice was visceral. Derek reached the parking garage level. His van was there exactly where he'd left it. 40 seconds. He opened the back doors, started the engine, waited. 35 seconds. Figures began to appear on the emergency stairs. Sarah first, practically carrying a thin man who could barely run. Michael. Then a grey-haired woman and an older man. Lisa and Robert. 20 seconds. "Emma!" Sarah shouted. "Where's Emma?" Derek looked at the stairs, his heart pounding. 15 seconds. And then she appeared, running, stumbling, with 2 flash drives clutched in her hand. "Get in!" Derek yelled. 10 seconds. Everyone threw themselves into the van. Derek stepped on the gas, and then the lights came back on. 30 seconds earlier than expected. Someone had manually reactivated the system, and Derek heard the sound he feared most at that moment. Heavy boots, many boots, echoing through the parking lot, voices shouting orders, armed men entering through the lobby. "Run!" he yelled, but they were already in the van. Derek sped toward the exit ramp, tires screeching on the concrete. If your heart is racing as fast as Derek's right now, write in the comments, "Speed up!" Because what comes next is the most intense part. Derek's van shot out of the underground parking garage like a rocket, tires screeching against the wet asphalt of the Seattle dawn. Behind him, the shouts of security guards echoed, but Derek didn't look back. He couldn't. Every second counted. He turned left at the back exit, a route he'd memorized in his first weeks on the job, unaware that one day that knowledge would save 6 lives. The streets were empty at that hour, just a few delivery trucks and night workers heading home. Derek sped down 5th Avenue, his heart pounding in his chest, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. In the back seat, 6 people were breathing heavily, some crying silently, others in a state of utter shock. The transformation from prisoners to fugitives hadn't yet solidified in their minds. It was too real and unreal at the same time. Sarah was obsessively checking out the back window, looking for signs of pursuit. "No one is following us," she said, but her voice trembled with disbelief. Emma clutched the 2 flash drives as if they were the most precious things in the world, and in a way they were. Those small devices contained the truth that had cost 17 lives and 3 years of unimaginable suffering. Derek wasted no time. He knew Seattle well enough to know exactly where he needed to go. The FBI headquarters was 23 minutes away downtown, but 23 minutes in a van full of officially dead people carrying evidence of a massive conspiracy felt like an eternity. He drove fast, but not too fast to attract attention. The tactical mindset never left him. Every decision calculated, every move deliberate. "We'll be okay," he said aloud, more to himself than to anyone else. "We'll get there. We'll deliver the evidence. This ends today." Michael, the man Sarah had practically carried, finally found his voice. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. You could have lost everything." Derek glanced in the rearview mirror and his eyes met Michael's. "Because it's the right thing to do," he replied simply, "and because I can't live knowing I saw something like that and did nothing." There was nothing more to say. Some actions don't need elaborate justifications. Sometimes a person's moral compass simply points in one direction and you follow it. At 4:56 a.m., Derek parked the van in front of the federal building that housed the FBI office in Seattle. His hands trembled now, the adrenaline finally giving way to the realization of what he had just done. He had challenged a criminal organization, risked his own life, and freed 6 people from a captivity that seemed impossible to escape. Sarah was the first to get out of the van. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the sky that was beginning to lighten with the first rays of dawn. 3 years since she had seen the sunrise freely. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. Derek helped everyone out, and then, with Emma holding the flash drives like a sacred offering, they entered the building. The agent on duty at reception looked at the ragged group in confusion until Derek uttered the magic words. "We need to report federal crimes, illegal mass surveillance, kidnapping, corporate fraud, and we have irrefutable proof." The impact of those words was immediate. Within 15 minutes, they were in a conference room surrounded by special agents. Emma plugged the flash drive into the laptop, and then they began to show everything. The revelations that followed in the subsequent days shook Seattle and then the entire country. The story exploded on every national news channel. 17 families who had buried loved ones received unbelievable calls. 6 of them were still alive. The emotional journey of these reunions was broadcast live. Mothers embracing children they thought were dead, siblings reuniting, spouses falling to their knees in gratitude and disbelief. The other 11, those who had actually died, finally had their stories told with the truth they deserved. These were not accidents. These were murders. Technova executives were arrested in nationwide coordinated operations. The CEO, the COO, security chiefs, all handcuffed and lined up. For cameras. The charges included conspiracy, kidnapping, murder, corporate espionage, and dozens of other federal violations. Sarah, Emma, Michael, Lisa, Robert and James entered witness protection. They received new identities, this time legitimate, this time free. They restarted their lives in different places, under different names, but ultimately on their own terms. And Derek? He returned home that morning when everything was finally settled. He opened the door to the small apartment he shared with his wife. She was in the kitchen making coffee, still in her pajamas, with no idea what her husband had just done. When she turned around and saw the expression on his face, she simply opened her arms. Derek joined in that embrace and finally let the tears fall. In that moment he understood something profound about his own journey. He had survived the war not by chance, but because he had a greater purpose waiting for him. To save lives when no one else was looking. To be in the right place at the right time, with enough courage to do the right thing. Sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms. Sometimes they are just night watchmen who refuse to ignore what is wrong. Sometimes it is ourselves, waiting for the moment that will define who we truly are. Look, if you've made it this far with me, it's because this story touched you in some way. And I keep thinking, how many people go through situations where they could make a difference but choose to look the other way? Derek could have ignored that notification. He could have finished his shift and gone home, but he didn't, and 6 lives were saved because of that decision. If this story moved you, if you felt every second of this journey with me, leave a like below. This shows me that this type of content is worthwhile, that real stories like this need to continue being told, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now, because every week I bring stories that will make you rethink the world around you, stories that show that courage exists in the most unlikely places. And in the comments, if you really stayed with me until the end, write, "Courage is a choice." I want to know how many of you are truly here, being part of this community that believes that truth matters, that people matter, that doing the right thing is always worthwhile. There's a video over here that you need to see, another true story that will show you how small decisions can have huge impacts. Click and continue. Watching over there. Thanks for being here. See you next time.